Awesome. All right. So, welcome everyone. Where we're going to be diving in today is at the very bottom paragraph of page 37. And for those of you who are maybe a little familiar with the book, I mean, where are we rocking and rolling? Oh, we're doing everyone's favorite. And actually, I'm gonna screen share again because how could I not? We're gonna be doing everyone's favorite, the Jaywalker. And Eileen, she's got the merch. She's wearing the recovered Jaywalker shirt. She knows what's up. So let's dive into the Jaywalker. And as we go through the story of the Jaywalker, what we're trying to see is see ourselves in the story in our lives. And we're trying to see the hopelessness and the inevitability of the first drink, the first drug, the first whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study. And actually, before I dive in, I think I would be remiss because I'm pretty sure that Rob is going to be putting a fun fact in the chat that the Jaywalker, I feel like you are, no pressure. I mean, he's not doing anything. Nobody put pressure on Rob. Stop pressuring Rob. But that I believe there was an alternate version of the Jaywalker, yeah, that was going to be the shoplifter, which is an interesting thing. A lot of people put down the bottle and start getting sticky fingers, just try to escape the spiritual malady. So we'll dive in, and what we're trying to really see is the obsession of the mind that takes us back again and again and again to that first destructive behavior, which is ruining our life. So our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. And keep in mind, if you live in the UK or different parts of the world, the term jaywalking isn't as common. It was when cars were sort of really beginning to take shape in America. A lot of the automobile lobbies were like, hey, it's not good publicity if like people are getting run over by our cars. We should like really push for people walking in the streets to be illegal. And I don't know why you're getting the etymology of the term jaywalker today, but here you are. The term jay used to be a reference to an unintelligent person, like an idiot. And so, they're just walking into traffic. And so that's the origin of it. And I'm just sharing that because I've worked with people in the UK who are like, yeah, what is a jaywalker? Because it's not illegal to cross the street wherever you want in certain parts of the world. So that's a little bit of the history. And so it says, and by the way, it says, our behavior is as absurd as incomprehensible with a passion, say, or with respect to the first drink, as an individual with a passion, say for jaywalking. Now, my experience is I had a lot of people that told me in my life to go play in traffic. And actually, I related to this. I used to be on the corners and squeegee people's windows for spare change. I don't know if I've ever told that story at this big book study, at least before, because I am a classy alcoholic. Um, so I've played in traffic, let me tell you. Woo! All right, it says he gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. Now, if we go back to the cycle of alcoholism or the cycle of addiction, we take that first drink, and what am I after? I'm after that sense of ease and comfort. And so, what is the jaywalker after that thrill? A feeling of relief, a feeling of release. So, we get that sense of ease and comfort. So he gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up until this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Like, okay, you want to run in traffic? That's a little weird, but you do you, Enjoy. It says luck then deserts him. And he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. And we can stop and we can look at our lives and we can look at what brings us to this study. And did we find that we were getting injured and injured and injured several times in rapid succession? And that injury might have been a physical injury, but it also might have been emotional injuries where we're losing things that begin to be important to us. Did we have some early warning signs that this might not be something that we are able to do safely? And then did we promptly ignore that and keep going? Because that's what I did. All right. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. And if we look at some of the pain and the suffering and the humiliation that my addiction brought me, that my alcoholism brought me, man, does it make sense that I would have cut it out if it was anything else? It says presently he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. And so what we're seeing is that those consequences are getting more and more and more serious. Within a few weeks after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. Has anyone ever gotten into the hospital as a result of their alcoholism, their addiction, or their compulsive behavior, and immediately got out of the hospital and did it again? Anyone here ever get out of detox or get out of treatment and immediately relapse? And it says presently, he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good. And what we see is him swearing off. He's saying, that's it. I'm not going to do it again. I'm done. I'm done. I'm never going to run out in traffic again. And he means it. But it says, but in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. So what happened? And what happened was he had the obsession of the mind, a thought that told him this time would be different. This time he could run out in traffic. You know, maybe I won't run out in traffic on the 401, but I can run out in traffic on the M8. I'm really hitting all my geography roads. The 401 is the major road in Ontario, and the M8 is the road that connects Edinburgh to Glasgow in Scotland. I don't know why I'm like this, but it's like this road will be different this time, you know? And it says, on through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful. Be careful. I'm going to be careful. I'm going to try to control. So he's trying to have some power and control over the physical allergy, where he's going to be careful while he's starting out in traffic, or to keep off the streets altogether. And he's trying to exert some power and control over the mental obsession that I'm not going to do it, that I'm really going to not jump out into traffic. I'm not going to do it again. And it says, finally, he can no longer work. And what we're seeing is the progression. We're seeing that it gets worse. Seeing that it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce, and he is held up to ridicule. Did I start losing things that I never, ever, ever wanted to lose? It says he tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, I did not try everything, but everything that I tried failed. Did I try everything that I could think of or I thought would be feasible for somebody like me to stay stopped? And it did not work. And if you're hanging out with me on a Monday, that's probably the case. I regularly refer to myself as like the last refuge of the truly hopeless. So welcome to the Big Book Study. Glad you're here. Love you the most. Love you lots. So it says, he shuts himself up in an asylum hoping to mend his ways, locking himself up in a detox, a treatment center, a sober living facility. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Again, that idea, did I go to treatment and relapse immediately after? Right? That is a sign that I have the obsession of the mind. That is a sign that the condition that I have is hopeless, that I am doomed to do it again. And it says such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? And part of why I have the illustration is like, we are recovered jaywalkers. We recover. You know what I mean? I am not a hopeless jaywalker anymore. We can recover, but I have to see the hopelessness of my predicament before I get recovered. I'll stop sharing the screen. I think it's funny. That's really literally my sense of humor. So it says, you may think our illustration is too ridiculous. You might be like, girl, a fire truck. Let's get, ooh, Rob's put a picture of a 1930s fire engine in the chat. I'm not able to see it because if I open the chat, I'll get too distracted. But everyone else, just enjoy that. Ooh, delightful. So it says, you may think our illustration is too ridiculous. But is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. So based on our experience, did I continue to go back to the thing that I knew that was hurting me, causing pain? And maybe for some of us, it did lead to some broken bones. But it also led for somebody like me, broken trust, broken hearts, broken relationships, broken dreams, broken opportunities, broken dignity, broken self-respect. And I would still go back to it again and again and again. And is that my experience? And so when it talks about we who have been through the ringer, now before we had like dryers, I was gonna say drying machines, which was again so old. Before we had our newfangled drying machines, and some of you have the ones that make the fancy noise when it's done, boop 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 boop. It plays a whole tune, you know. There were ringers, so you would hand wash, like on a washing board, and then you would take it and it would a ringer would take, and some of you guys are like, yes, I know, Paige. It would take the clothes and it would compress them so tightly that almost all the water would be like wrung out of them. That's where that comes from. And so we who have been through the ringer, man, have I gone through that where I have been squeezed so tightly, every ounce of goodness and hope and joy and happiness has been like, yeah, just run right out of me. So we got the ringer. So we've been through the ringer. It says that this illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. Now, that strangely insane is pointing again to the obsession of the mind. The strangely insane thing is not that when I drink like a whole 2-6, that I do not socially appropriate things. Because to be fair, if anyone drinks that much, you know, they won't do socially appropriate things. But the problem is, the strangely insane thing about who I am is that I go back to it again and again and again. There is an abundance of evidence that this is ruining my life, and I go back to it, and that is what is strangely insane. What is strangely insane is when I am as sober as I am today, I have that, and my illness is untreated. I have that thought that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink, drug, whatever brings you to this study. And it says it's strong language, you know, like the book's gonna really meet us where we're at, but it's doing a gentle meeting us where we're at. It was like, hey, that's a little strong. I just got here. Y'all are calling me strangely insane. Rude, you know. But isn't it true? If I hold my experience up to the light of this book, isn't it true that the fact that I would go back to this thing that is destroying my life, ruining my family, causing harm to those I love, destroying my health, I go back to it. Man, that is insane. And this, man, I love, because the book is so like, it's so kind. You know, sometimes we think like AA or CA or DAA, it's like hard line, hard nose. Now this book meets us where we're at, but it doesn't leave us there. It's going to take us where we need to go. So the book is meeting us with some of you are thinking. So those of us who are in that place of the denial, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. Now, we don't have to do a show of hands, but if anyone here has ever come to a meeting, yeah, Ben already knows. He's like, I'm here, that's right. You ever come to a meeting or a big book study and you're like, oh, that called me right out. Like, oh my goodness, you pulled my covers. Rude. And then there's that little voice in the back of your head that goes, but I'm not that bad. But I never squeegeed a window. It takes technique. I did it. I wasn't good at it. I never, and that's actually why I don't talk about some of that stuff, is because we think like, oh, I didn't do that. I must not be that bad. Keep in mind, I got here and I didn't think I was that bad. And so it's meeting us in our, oh, what you say is true. It doesn't fully apply. we admit we have some of these symptoms. I want to point out some of the two symptoms that we're really hammering home: the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind. We'll talk about the malady of the spirit as we get into steps 2 and 3. But like, we're trying to hammer home two symptoms, and it's like we have some of those two symptoms, but it's not, no. But we've not gone to the extremes you fellows did. No, I've not passed out behind a dumpster like Paige. Tell me about how you ended up so classy. Pinkies up the whole way. You guys know. And it says, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. And so what it's saying is like, oh, no. I won't get drunk again. I won't relapse because I have self-knowledge. Have we ever come to the rooms at 12-step? Have we ever come to a big book study? Have we ever been armed? No, maybe not armed, but have we ever had facts about ourselves? Have we ever known about the allergy of the body and did it again? And more powerful than that, have we known about the obsession of the mind and done it again? You see, knowledge cannot keep me sober. Knowing about the obsession of the mind does nothing to stop the obsession of the mind. It does nothing to stop it. And it says, we have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. Now, they couldn't probably, I was going to make something up. Well, I think we only have one of the history husbands here. Okay, I'm making something up. Don't write this down. So in the original manuscript, disclaimer, that's not true. I'm making a joke. It absolutely said, we certainly do not intend to go F yourself, shove it up your butt, is what it said in the original manuscript. It's not what it said. But like, that's kind of about a polite way of saying that. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, oh, thanks for the information. Like, okay, bud. Okay, like, well, no, thank you. And so that is the book meeting us where we're at, calling us out, labeling our resistance, labeling our denial. And then it takes us where we need to go. It says that may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily, at the present time are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. So the ability to stop or moderate is outside of my capabilities, which is really helpful for me to understand, especially if I am somebody who has been struggling and relapsing and relapsing and relapsing and relapsing. Because sometimes I think when we have chronic relapses, there's that feeling that, man, they don't want it enough. They're not trying hard enough. Now what they have is they have this illness. They have this illness. And if I got this illness, and I'm saying that as I could stay sober for a little while. I could put some months between me and the last drink. Now, I will be quite honest, I wanted to die the whole time, and I always find it's important to talk about that. I was not fun to be around. Oh, let me tell you, like, oh, I could suck the energy right out of the room. Like, oh no, Paige here, like that sort of vibe. Because I was miserable and awful, and it was so painful, not just for me, but for everyone. So listen, the spiritual awakening, it's a gift, and it's a gift for me, and it's a gift for everyone that's got to put up with me. So thanks for putting up with me. But if I'm not able to stop and I'm not able to moderate, what's wrong with me? The only thing that is wrong with me is I have this illness. And what is wonderful is we have a solution for that. And the solution is the spiritual awakening that comes as the result of the 12 steps. So it says, but the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception. Now, this is hammering home. It's in italics. Now, it was, I think, Maureen that was doing a lot of the heavy footwork on the figuring out if italics cost more in the 1930s. Turns out, no, probably right about the time this book was written, it didn't cost anymore. But for a long time, that was something that was repeated. I repeated it because I heard it and I believed it. But why would we repeat that other than not having correct information? Well, also because there's a meaning behind it. And the meaning is, girl, if it's in italics, it's important. Pay attention. That's what we're trying to get at. So didn't cost any extra, but I mean, I already made up some some history earlier in the big book study. So I gotta balance it out, you know? So highlight, underline, because we are trying to just hammer this home. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. Knowing I'm an alcoholic cannot keep me sober. Knowing I'm an addict cannot keep me sober. Knowing that I'm a compulsive overeater, gambler, codependent, whatever brings you to this study, cannot keep me sober. I can memorize parts of this book. That cannot keep me sober. It does not work based on self-knowledge. And it says this is a point we wish to emphasize, to re-emphasize. So it's not saying, hey, this is important. It's saying not only is it important, we're going to smash it home again and again and again. And it says that we wish to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as it has been revealed to us at a bitter experience. So I'm going to point something out, like the tone of that. Often if we're like at a meeting where we're kind of reading through the book, we'll hear it read. So, but the actual potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is the point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, smash home upon our alcoholic readers. You know, that's kind of how we hear it, like monotone and somebody just trying to get through it. But the language that is being used is building a point of emphasis. It really is. We want to emphasize this, re-emphasize this, smash this home. Self-knowledge cannot, will not keep us sober. And that's even self-knowledge about me. Me, not just my illness, but me. I cannot stay sober. And when it talks about revealed out of bitter experience, it's not a theory. It's not I was reading a medical journal and best practices seemed, no, we saw it again and again and again and again. That bitter experience is watching the flames of life of alcoholics get snuffed out by this illness again and again and again. That is the bitter experience. Like, this is our experience, and that's what we have to share. And so it says, let us take another illustration. So Fred. Now, Fred is not actually Fred. Fred, his name is Harry Brick. Hold on. Oh, hold on. I gotta move Fred over so y'all can see him. That's Fred. I mean, Rob's gonna put in a less artsy fartsy picture of Fred in the chat, but we're rocking with this one over here on the share screen. Everybody loves him. We're gonna read about him a little bit. But that Fred is Harry Brick, and his story was in the first edition, and it was called A Different Slant. And what's interesting is his story in the first edition is actually shorter than what we're going to see and what we're going to read in the chapter more about alcoholism. But really, the thrust of what he was trying to hammer home is that it doesn't matter like the status you come from or where you come from. Anyone can be an alcoholic. And so that's absolutely what he was trying to hammer home. So I'm not going to keep the share screen up the whole time, but I am for a little bit because how do you not love Fred? You know, Jim's a little persnickety. Jim's, oh, you can tell Jim's just seething with resentment, but Fred, oh, he's great. So it says Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. And again, as we go through this, we're going to have a look for this cycle. We're going to have a look for the moment that Fred, the mental obsession, hits. And Fred goes and says, I'm also jazzercised. Sorry, this is absolutely a quick tangent. Because it's February 10th, and in 4 days, it'll be Valentine's Day. And like doesn't that feel like a fitting, me on theme, on brand, on holiday? Absolutely never in my life except on accident. So yeah, I'm just jazzercised about that. So Fred is a well-known partner in an accounting firm. And to be a partner in a firm, what that means is he is a co-owner. Like partners in a law firm are co-owners. So he's a co-owner of an accounting firm. So, he's got his life together on the outside. Like he's got a career. Like, oh, he is doing some stuff in accounting. It says his income is good. Well, yeah, he's a partner. And it says he has a fine home, is happily married, and the father of promising children of college age. So he's got a good wife, good home, kids that are doing well. They're crushing it. They're going to college age. They're doing great, you know? He is so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. Everybody loves Fred. He's just the best. How do you not love this guy? To all appearances. Now, keep in mind, outward appearances are not inward reality at all. We're going to read that when we get into the chapter more about alcoholism. So, to all appearances, he is a stable, well-balanced individual. And I'll be honest with you guys, at no point in my life have I ever appeared to be a stable, well-balanced individual. So I gotta look up to Fred. He's got something going on. I'm just kidding. And it says, yet he is an alcoholic. So all of those things, all of those successes, all of those things that, like, you know, those things that we think, I'm not an alcoholic, I still have X, Y, Z. You know what I mean? Oh, all those things that I think make disqualify me. I didn't pass out behind a dumpster. I didn't squeegee a car. I have a relationship. I've got a home. I've got a good job. I got kids. I got this. I got that. And we're going to see that none of that matters. So yet he is an alcoholic. Yet he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. And I'm going to point out that that is a sign that he has drank himself into the hospital. And that means he's got the physical allergy. Because people who are able to control the amount they drink do not drink themselves into the hospital with a bad case of jitters. Jitters would be he's showing some signs of DTs. You know what I mean? That's kind of what we're looking at. So it says it was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. Listen, I have just been really stressed out at the accounting firm, and I'm just here to rest my nerves. Anyone, and I didn't do this, but anyone go to rehab and then like, no, you know, I'm really here for all my other issues, you know? Yeah, listen, I don't, yeah, you know, girl, I'm not here because of alcoholism or drug addiction. I've got to look at all my XYZs, all these other things that, no, you know? And this I love. The doctor intimated strongly he might be worse than he realized. And if you know doctors, they're not known for bedside manner. So the doctors, this is the, I'm going to make up another history thing. This is the original transcript of how he and his doctors spoke to each other. So Harry Brick, Fred, he was lying in bed and he's like, Doc, I'm doing okay. I'm rocking and rolling. I'm here to rest my nerves. I'm a stressed out, important businessman. And the doctor was like, absolutely not. You're an effing alcoholic. Pull your head out of your butt. That's the transcript. When we don't have all the history husbands, I can get away with a little bit. I'm making that up. It didn't really happen that way. That's my disclaimer. I don't think anyone needed the disclaimer, but just in case, I always want to give a disclaimer. So it says he made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. And so if we're writing in our book, we can now make a note that that is him swearing off. He is swearing off, I am not going to drink again. And we're going to see him go through that cycle. And we're going to see him drink again. Because for us to drink again or use again or relapse is inevitable if we have this illness. So he swore off. For a few days, hold on, sorry. The doctor intimated strongly he might be worse than he realized. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. So that's that remorse, regret. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. That is him swearing off. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so in spite of his character and standing. And this is a man of high moral character and high upstanding. He is a good guy. Everybody loves Fred. Fred's great, right? We love him. And yet, those things cannot keep him sober. So many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore. I had a galore full of them. That's not how you conjugate that word, but a galore full of moral and philosophical convictions. I could not live up to them. There is no power in that against the inevitable relapse. So Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem. So he's like, thanks for the information. I'm good. I'm not as bad as you guys. So it says we told him what we knew of alcoholism. So what they were laying down was the information of step one. They were probably driving home the physical allergy, but more than that, the obsession of the mind that you're going to drink again. From our experience, we drank again, we drank again, we drank again. We had a thought that happened when we were sober that took us back again and again. And it says he was interested and conceded he had some of the symptoms. And at this point in the book, they're probably only focusing on the two of them. So I have some of the two symptoms. I mean, in a little bit, we'll maybe have a look at a third. But I mean, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I got some of them, but not all of them, right? And we can see that this is that, again, the story is meant to illustrate our own denial. No, I'm not as bad as you guys. That's exactly where Fred is. So he admitted he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. Now, I know that you lovely folks absolutely would have lots of knowledge and self-knowledge, but never a humiliating experience or 2 or 6 or 36 or so many. Oh. But if you're like me, I showed up with a whole lot of humiliating experiences, and I showed up with a lot of knowledge of who I was. And that would not work for me. That's what we're trying to see. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day, we were told he was back in the hospital. This time, he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. And obviously, so what happened? How did he end up back in the hospital? He didn't get pneumonia. What happened was the obsession of the mind. He had that thought, and then he took that drink. As soon as he took that drink, the allergy took him. He went on a spree, ended up in the hospital. So what we're going to focus on is the obsession of the mind. What was the thought? So the story he told is most instructive, for here is a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking. And I'm just going to point something out. He didn't have a full step one experience because he absolutely wasn't able to see that he was an alcoholic. He wasn't able to see that he was going to drink again. And that's what we're trying to do in step one. But here's a guy who absolutely was convinced he needed to stop drinking. I can't stay sober on being convinced I need to stop. I can't stay sober on that. It is not possible for somebody like myself or my homie Fred. And he's not my best friend, but I think we're pretty close. Stop making friends with the co-founders and these history people. It's a parasocial relationship page. I can't hear you over the sound of Fitzmayo being my homie. Billy Dubs knows what's up. Oh, gosh. So the story told us most instructive. For here's a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuses for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, was yet flat on his back nevertheless. Flat on his back, think like a turtle. Absolutely hopeless. Hopeless, helpless. There was nothing he could do. And so here, listen, so many of us have had those experiences where we are convinced we need to stop. We had no excuse for drinking, and not me, but maybe most of you had splendid judgment and determination on all your other concerns. And Fred is a delightful juxtaposition to our friend Jim. So if you don't remember Jim, he was the gentleman that got a case of the Sudleys and put the whiskey in his milk. And as we went through Jim's story, we could see the spiritual malady all over Jim. We could see the resentments. We could see him like brimming with like, oh girl, you got to write some inventory. Like we could see that all over Jim. But as we see Fred, he's there's nothing the bother, there's nothing the matter. And we're going to see what happens. And a juxtaposition is because I sometimes use weird words. They're not smart words, they're weird words. A juxtaposition is where you jam together two polar opposites for contrast, to create that contrast, to provide meaning. So, shabam! We got Jim, we got Fred, and interposed in there is Captain Jaywalker. Not Captain, but I thought I'd give him a promotion and maybe a fancy hat. Alrighty. So, it says, let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. And you can make a little note that right there, what we are talking about is the obsession of the mind. He's saying, I appreciate what you were saying about the obsession of the mind. Yeah, that makes sense. But I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. Anyone here? Oh, there's no way I'm never going to drink again. There's no way. I'm confident. I got this. This time's different. There's something different this time. I can feel it, you know. I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you felt. So I wasn't as bad as you. I hadn't gone as far as you. And that I'd been usually successful in licking my other personal problems. So he was able to deal with other personal problems. He was able to deal with other things that were difficult in his life and overcome them. And how could he not? He's Fred. He's just so good. He's got his life together. So he says, it goes on to say that I had been usually successful in licking my other problems and that I would therefore be successful where you men fail. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. So these are the elements of Fred's defense. He has got willpower. He is like got his on guard. He's on guard. He's got willpower. He's got self-knowledge. He's got a humiliating experience. And he's going to build this structure of defense against him and that first drink. Spoilers, it's not going to work. And we're going to see that. So I don't mean to ruin the end of the story, but all right. So it said, in that frame of mind, I went about my business. And for a time, all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. Now, I'm going to point something out. This is not the full-blown mental obsession on him, but we're pointing to a very subtle, a very, very subtle effect of the mental obsession. I had no problem refusing drinks. Perhaps I'm overthinking it. And you see, here's the thing. Whatever defense I raise, it'll inevitably fall. Whatever defense I raise. And I'll tell you, I've been around this thing a while. And if I keep doing the work on a daily basis, man, I can continue to live in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. But here's the thing. If I stop doing the work, I've got a little bit of a grace period. But the mental obsession is not going to right away say, Paige, take a drink. Paige, go get high. It's way more subtle than that. It looks like I don't need to do my evening review. I don't need to. Nobody. I do every night, even if I'm up too late. It's not a good one if I'm up too late, but I do it. I'm not calling anyone out either. But nobody does their evening review. Oh, I don't need to do all that. I don't need to meditate. I can just put that off. I don't need to pray. I don't need to make that amends. I don't need to work with so many people. I don't need to take that service commitment. None of my sponsees are staying sober. What's the point? I don't need to go to so many meetings. And we see the slow erosion of the actions that allow me to live in a state of grace until maybe just one comes to mind. And that is the subtlety of the mental obsession. A lot of times people will talk about, oh, my illness is out in the parking lot doing push-ups. And I don't know if that's the case. But my friend Terry and I, we do a big book study on Fridays. And I remember one Friday, he's like, that's not what mine's doing. Mine's taking acting classes. And I'm like, ooh, that is good. Yeah, that is good. Because that's like, it is cunning. It is cunning. He can't even see it. I cannot even see it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a hard pivot. And we're going to play a game that is called Finding Fred's Triggers. And some of you are like, what? And I want you to know this game is very, very tongue in cheek. And I mean it like purely in jest. But it's that idea, like anyone come here, you just got to watch your triggers. You just got to avoid people, places, and things. The problem is I am a people, and you're people, and we're in a place. And there's things around, you know what I mean? And there's that implication that what I need to do, and to be fair, if I'm newly sober, it is smart to not hang out in bars and not hang out with the old drinking buddies before I've had a spiritual awakening. That's not a bad idea. But that idea of I just got to know my triggers and everything will be okay. And so I like at Fred's story to play the game. Let's find out what Fred's triggers are. All right. It says, one day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. That's got to be it. You guys, I think I found it. That's his trigger. Going out of town, traveling. That's got to be it. Strange places, strange people. That's got to be a trigger. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Okay, so that couldn't be his trigger. Maybe he wasn't feeling well. Maybe he was a little under the weather, a little, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Maybe that's it. Physically, I felt fine. Okay, so that can't be his trigger. All right, maybe he was having a lot of problems, pressing problems, worries, troubles, a lot of things going on in his mind. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. Okay, well, maybe when he was out of town, the business didn't go well. Oh, man, go out of town, you present this evidence to a government bureau, and it all falls apart. Maybe that was his trigger. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. Maybe it was really cloudy. I have a feeling, what if clouds are his trigger? You got to stay in the sunlight, right? It was the end of perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Darn it, that can't be his trigger. It goes on to say, as I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner, I have a feeling he was fully clothed when he did the business work presenting. So getting dressed, that's probably not his trigger because he'd already done that. And it says, as I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. And you can make a little note of the mental obsession, because that's what hit him. But if you're looking at the page, we didn't find his trigger. Where is his trigger? Here it is. I got you. Thresholds. Thresholds. All he's got to do is avoid thresholds. If you don't know what a threshold is, it's any doorway. Just avoid doorways of any sort, and you can stay sober. And so again, with that tongue-in-cheek sort of reference, if you want to, now this is a little silly, but you can make a note in your book to pop over to page 160. Page 160. And what we're going to look is we're going to go to the second full paragraph. It's about halfway down the page on 160. And the place that we're talking about is T. Henry and Clarence, or Williams' house in Akron, 676 Palisades Drive. They were Oxford group members who were letting the drug squad have meetings there. So this is the place that they're talking about. So it says, many a man, yet dazed from his hospital experience, has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. And all I'm going to point out is, thank goodness we get to be recovered. Thank goodness, we get to experience the freedom that is on offer, where we can go anywhere. So we can cross thresholds if we're recovered. I promise you. And I love that. And the very literal definition of a threshold is going from one state to another. And that's kind of what we do in the spiritual journey. We go from this unrecovered state to taking a course of action that takes us to a completely different state, a state of being recovered, a state of being awakened spiritually, a state of the fourth dimension. Like that's where we get to go. And that's what we get to experience. So thank goodness I don't got to avoid my thresholds. And back in the day, they used to like use thresh, like reeds to like keep the air out and stuff. So that's probably way more information than anyone ever wanted to get on thresholds in their entire life. So we're topped up with threshold facts, and I apologize profusely. Back to page 41. So the mental obsession kicks in, and we see it in the italics. The thought comes to mind, it would be nice to have a couple cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. He didn't think of the consequences. He didn't think what the alcoholic friends had told him. He didn't think about how every single time he had done it before, it ended him, not every single time, but lately it has ended him up in the hospital. He didn't think about his family, his kids, the consequences. He did not think of any of that. He says, I ordered a cocktail and then my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed. And that is the physical allergy. That one cocktail to another, to a highball, and we're going to see that physical allergy, like it's now set off, and we're going to see it take him on his spree. So we're going to see what this spree looks like. So it says, when I returned to the hotel, it struck me that a highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty the next morning. We're on the spree, allergy full force, off we go. I have a shadowy recollection. Now, a shadowy recollection is not a full blackout, but a little more of a brownout. You know, when you get bits and pieces that you gotta like almost like scotch tape together the morning after, like where and then what and then ooh, and actually, you know what? I'm not playing this game. I don't want to remember. Yeah. Uh, and it's funny too. I remember the first time I was actually sober a little while where I overheard somebody say that they had blackout. This was when I was in university. They're like, oh, I blacked out last night. I'm really scared. And I'm like, oh, like this was my inner monologue. I didn't address them. I was like, oh, you mean that doesn't happen to you almost every single time? You mean that is a rare and frightening occurrence, not a Tuesday? Cool, 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 cool. So I just parked that piece of information. Yeah. If you black out on the regular, I'm just going to say, apparently, that is allergic, or how I do weekdays, if you're like me. All right, so I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. That is what we like to refer to as a big oops. That is a big oopsies. Oh, no. And there's no cell phones. And she might have been the best untreated Al-Anon there was, but she was not going to be able to like have an eye tag following him. Like, where is he? Turn on your location. You know what I mean? She didn't know where he is. New York, kind of a big place. A lot of people there. And he is gone. And it says, the driver escorted me about for several days. Ooh, oopsies. Oopsie doopsies. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. And and goodness, I can't imagine how high that taxi bill was. Like, I hope you could expense that, because that would have been pricey, right? But when he ends up in the hospital, that mental, physical suffering that is just unbearable, that is his remorse and regret. And he says, as soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. That's the power of the mental obsession. he was able to no, think through the drink, no, play the tape to the end, no, think of the consequences. But at this moment, it wasn't there. At that moment, a couple cocktails, or not a couple, a cocktail would be nice. That was all. The thought comes to mind before the drink crosses his lips. That is the power of the mental obsession. I commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied, how they predicted, right? And how would they be able to predict? Because that is alcoholism. If I have this illness, I will drink again. I will use again. I will relapse. How they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the mental obsession, the time and place would come, I would drink again. And that's what we need to see. That step one experience. I will relapse. It's not a matter of if, but when. They said that though I did raise a defense, and we saw the defense. We saw it. We saw the self-knowledge. We saw the humiliating experience. We saw the I'm going to be on guard. We saw the willpower. We saw the defense. So though he did raise it, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind, and again, the mental obsession. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge, highlight, underline, would not help in those strange mental blank spot. And the strange mental blank spot is the obsession of the mind. In those moments, we can't think about the consequences. In those moments, we can't think through the drink. We can't play the tape to the end. In those moments, the obsession is on me, and I can't do anything to stop myself from taking that first drink. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them, and this is important, hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. I spoke out at a couple of years ago at a Cocaine Anonymous meeting out in Trenton, Ontario. I got to do it in person, and the meeting was called Crushing Blow, which is, I mean, that's a pretty good one for a CA meeting. You know, that's a clever name. But that hopelessly defeated, that's where I need to get to, that I can see that there is no other way for me. Now, I might go a little bit over because I think it might be just easiest to try to finish this chapter. So just, for next week, because we'll be starting step 2, we agnostic. So apologies in advance. I'm not doing well at managing my time, just like how I am at managing my life. Shocker. So 2 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much. And that grinning, I'm going to point something out. Sometimes for a long time, I would read it as these alcoholics are like, told you so, told you so. But what I'm going to point out is I don't think that's why they were grinning. I think because they had worked with him, and you guys probably know what it's like when you work with somebody who is not interested or open to what you have to say, that's got an answer for every question, that no, thank you, the walls are up, I'm not like you. But then you see that same person a couple relapses later, and you can see the despair and hopelessness on their face. Maybe they're even crying. And man, that's when I get excited. Not because I'm like a sadist. I'm deeply codependent and I care about people probably too much. And so it's definitely not that. But I can see that window of willingness has opened up. That's what I can see. They grinned, which I didn't like so much, so they could see his hopelessness. And I think they're smiling because they're like, man, we got a chance with him. We got a chance with this one. And then they asked me if I thought myself an alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. Do you think you're an alcoholic? And are you done fighting? That's what they're asking. And if you're writing in your book, you can make a little note. Now, we're not going to pop over there today because I'm really pushing it for time. But you can make a little note to see page 58, to see page 90, to see page, oh, hold on, I got to remember. Page 90. We're using what little mental faculties I have. Page 90, page 112, and page 142. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because we're going to see this question get asked again and again and again, a number of different ways. So it says, I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality, the obsession of the mind, that's what we're talking about, the obsession of the mind that I had exhibited in Washington was a hopeless condition. Hopeless condition. And it says they cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. So they shared from their own experience examples from their life of the cycle by the dozen. So like 6, hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. And it says this process of sharing their own experiences, going through the story, just how Fred did, focusing on the obsession of the mind, that snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. And in that moment was his step 1. That last flicker of conviction that gets snuffed out, that he could do it himself, that he could do it his way. Done. They outlined the spiritual answer and the program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. So for us, the spiritual answer is the spiritual awakening, and the program of action for us today is the 12 steps. And it says, though I had been only a nominal churchman, I went to church a little bit, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. And that was his second step. He's like, okay, I can buy in that there is a power greater than me, and I can buy in that this power is greater than my alcoholism. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. Yikes. And so I just point that out because none of us come to the 12 steps and think, oh yeah, I can't wait to do that. I think all of us are like, yes, that is entirely sensible. Ooh, but it's a little drastic. Like, I don't want to do that. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window that get rid of old ideas. That was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, now that moment he makes up his mind that he is going to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like his life depends on it, that is his third step. Step 3. He makes up his mind to go through with the process. I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. And it proved to be not based on that third step decision, but proved to be based on him continuing to take the actions of these steps. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. Problems, not problem, problems. All my problems. So not just the problem of alcohol or alcoholism or addiction or whatever brings you to this study. Here's my experience. And yeah, Rob's got it. Solve my problem. There is not a problem that I have in my life. And of course, if I need outside help, that's more than okay. But there's not a problem in my life that I cannot take to the power which is God, that I cannot take to the process of these 12 steps. All my problems I have since brought into a way of living. I want to emphasize this is a way of life, infinitely more satisfying, and I hope more useful than the life I had lived before. My old manner of life, way of life, was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst that I have now. I would not go back to it, even if I could. And that's often quoted as like my worst day sober is better than my best day drinking, and misquoted in that way. But what he's saying is the quality of life that he has now, he would not trade for the life that he had back then. So it says, Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. We had felt only the first nip of the ringer, or he had felt only the first nip of the ringer. So he got his fingers caught in the ringer, but he didn't go all the way through. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problems. But that is not an external mangling. It can be an internal mangling. I have to be pretty badly mangled, but I can be mangled on the inside. Many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of these men, that's Dr. Percy Pollock of the Bellevue Hospital in New York City, recently made this statement to some of us. What you say about the general, and I want to emphasize this again, hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. That my plight is hopeless. As to 2 men, and those 2 men were probably Bill Wilson and Fitz Mayo, possibly Hank, but I have a feeling it's Bill and Fitz. One of the history people can correct me. And that's based on vibes. As the two men whose stories you have heard, there is no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless apart from divine help. And we're starting to, again, hopeless. And that divine help, that's what we're after. It said, had you offered yourselves as patients at this hospital, I would not have taken you if I've been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have a profound respect for the spiritual approach in cases such as yours. Thank you so much for coming. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution. So if I have this illness, there is virtually no other solution. And this last paragraph is hammering home again and again what we have been trying to say this whole chapter. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. If I have no effective mental defense, I will relapse. That's what it's saying. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being and beyond human aid, human power can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a capital H, capital P, higher power. And we'll talk about how we begin to get open to that in step 2. And I genuinely, I try to avoid going over. So I thank you guys for those that were able to stick with me. I'm going to stop the recording and we can wrap up with the Serenity Prayer.
I just wanted to add a bit of a postscript to the Big Book study. We spoke about the doctor who made that statement of the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. Now, I read that off just quickly as Dr. Percy Pollock of the Bellevue Hospital in New York. Now, I often reference also a Dr. Leslie B. Holman of Johns Hopkins University, who was approached by Bill and Fitz Mayo on July of 1938, and just as another possibility of who that was. And after the meeting, it was pointed out that there's been more evidence that that person is Dr. Leslie B. Holman. And so what I'll do is I'll include this as a bit of a postscript and include the letter that was shared with me, because Rob's awesome, and just so we always have the most accurate or the closest to information of the who's who and the what's what. And in the chapter Writing the Big Book, you can find this reference. It's in chapter 11, and I believe it's around page 205, but man, don't quote me. I've been wrong today, so thanks.